If you're new here, my name is RuthAnn. My husband Lance was a service-connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full-time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. This is a solo episode, and there have been times when I've been the only one talking on an episode, but most of the time, Jenna is there to support me through that. Today, she's not here at all. It is just me sitting here recording this by myself. And it's because this is a personal reflection on a trip that I took, which was partially planned by my late husband, Lance, and it was for my 50th birthday. So, like I said, Jenna isn't here with me now, but she did go on this trip with me. So I will be talking about her because having her there played a key role in my healing process. This episode is going to explore grief, letting go of that grief, and also the healing power of travel, if you like to travel. So, a little background on the trip. Lance was on hospice when I turned 49, and it was probably about 10 days or so before my 49th birthday. Lance suddenly realized that he wasn't going to be around for my 50th birthday, and he was very upset because he always made a big deal out of birthdays. And because he had really bad short-term memory loss, he brought it up multiple times a day. And I'm not joking. There was one day, I know he brought it up at least 30 times. And it was getting really hard for me to hear about it because it was a constant reminder to me that he was dying and that he wasn't going to be around for my 50th birthday, which is a really big deal. So I came up with the idea and I recorded a conversation with him. And I said something along the lines of, you're on hospice because, again, short-term memory loss. I had to tell him every day that he was on hospice. So I brought up the fact that he wasn't going to be around for my 50th birthday. And I said, and I know that that really upsets you. So what if you bought my 50th birthday gift now, and then you know that it's already taken care of? And he said he liked that idea. He had known that I had always wanted to go to Ireland. It was a lifelong dream of mine, and I'd had a couple of trips fall through when I was in my 20s. So I asked him if he would pay for me to stay in Ireland for a week. And he said he loved that idea. I was going to go with a friend. And so he paid for the trip, and then he felt better about it. I'm so glad I recorded that conversation because, like I said, he had really bad short-term memory loss. So he continued to bring up, oh no, I'm not going to be around for your 50th birthday. And I would just get out my phone and hand it to him so he could watch the video. And I know that he watched that video at least 50 times. And he'd get done watching it and he would say, I'm so glad you recorded that. And I was so glad I recorded it because then I didn't have to repeat the story every time. And it gave me a few minutes to go do something else while he was watching the video. A few months before my 50th birthday, the world was still locked down from the pandemic. So I postponed the trip. And then the next 3 years, something came up every year that prevented me from going. And this year, I was finally able to go. And Jenna offered to go with me. Well, because Ireland had been a lifelong dream, it was something that I had talked to Lance about all the years that I knew him, 27 years. It was bittersweet because I thought about him constantly. There were reminders of him everywhere. And just the things that I saw that I wanted to tell him about. I've never seen so many shades of green in my life. It was incredible. I didn't know that there were that many shades of green. And there were wildflowers everywhere. Lance and I used to take trips just to go see wildflowers. That's how much we both loved wildflowers. And that was absolutely incredible. There was also the kindness of the people there. I have lived in a couple of states where I thought these are the kindest people I've ever encountered. And That was nothing compared to what I experienced in Ireland. Kindness is a way of life there. There was also the music in the pubs. I knew that that was going to be different, but I didn't know just how different it was going to be. It's nothing like going to a bar in the United States. A pub is an experience all in itself, the atmosphere, the music, the live music. Lance loved music and I love music. That was something that Lance and I always experienced together. We went to concerts all the time. So while I loved going into those pubs and listening to that live music, it was also something that I knew that Lance would have loved. And then there was the town that he paid for me to stay in, Kenmare. How many times did I have to remember that he was gone? One of the things that I told Lance when we talked about him paying for this trip for me was that once I got to Ireland, I would buy a round of Guinness in honor of him because Guinness had been his favorite beer. And so I told him, I'll buy a round in honor of you. And he said he really liked that idea. So while Jenna and I were in Kenmare, Jenna found a little room in the back of this pub, and we went and sat in there and we talked about Lance, and we both cried and we remembered him and what an amazing human being he was. And we toasted in honor of him, and it was beautiful and it was perfect. Lance would have been so happy to know that I finally made it to Ireland. But every time that thought came up, the grief came right back. It was always there underneath the surface. Sometimes when it came out, it was there for just a moment, but sometimes it was there for quite a while longer. And it didn't seem like it was anything that I had any control over. But there was one thing that I did while we were in Kenmare that was so healing for me. When I was getting ready for the trip to Ireland, I was packing up all of my things. I knew that Jenna and I were going to do a lot of walking. And I had this pair of walking shoes that was so comfortable. It was a brand of shoes that I had worn all the years that I cared for Lance. And the reason that I wore this brand was, and this particular shoe was because it was slip on and it was incredibly comfortable. Never had to break these shoes in, put them on. They immediately were comfortable. Never, ever had a blister on my feet from them or anything. But it also protected my feet from the wheelchair. And so when I took those out, when I got to Ireland and I put them on to walk, yep, still the most comfortable walking shoes I have ever worn. But there was a heaviness to them because of what they meant, because of why I had them. And it was something that I kept thinking about while I was wearing them. We only ended up spending 2 nights in Kenmare, and I'm glad for that because I think if I would have spent an entire week there, like what Lance had paid for, I think that that would have been too much because I felt the most heaviness while I was in Kenmare because that was where he paid for me to stay. So as we were packing up to leave, we put together a bag. There were clothes that we decided we didn't need to take home with us. And the shoes were the first thing I put in the bag. And we donated all of this to a local thrift store. We got on the bus to head to Killarney to get our train back to Dublin. But while we were on the bus, I'm looking out the window at these beautiful green rolling hills and the mountains and the trees everywhere and the winding roads. And I felt like a 50-pound weight had been lifted off of me. It was a physical release of the grief, leaving those shoes behind. And then after I got home, I felt like making some more changes. One of those things was decluttering my house and starting to get rid of some of those more personal items of Lance's that I hadn't been able to let go of. I was getting rid of more emotional heaviness by physically getting rid of some of these things. When I told my counselor about it, she commented that I'm unburdening myself of my grief. And that's exactly what's happening. Part of the challenge of getting rid of things, though, is balancing which memories to keep versus what I need to release. And I know that that's something that a lot of caregivers face and a lot of former caregivers face because grief is hard. And in the beginning, when I started getting rid of things, I literally felt like I was throwing him away when I got rid of his things. And so I couldn't do it. And that's why I still had so many things. I still have so many things, but I've gotten rid of a lot of things just since this trip to Ireland. For me, travel has always been healing. It's something that I've always enjoyed. It was something that Lance always enjoyed. So, all the years that I cared for him, travel was healing for both of us. Every trip I've taken since Lance died has been healing in some way for me. But this one to Ireland has had the most impact on me. While Lance was alive, travel was the place where we both felt most normal. And I think the reason for that was because in our hometown, we always got stares no matter where we went, whether it was the grocery store or the gym or to a department store. Wherever we went, we just always felt out of place because people stared at us because he was in a wheelchair. But when you travel, you're supposed to be out of place. You're supposed to get those stares from people. So it felt normal for people to be staring at us when we were on vacation or when we were in a town where we normally didn't spend time. But you know what the weird thing was? People stared at us less when we were traveling than they did in our hometown. If you like to travel, it can be very healing as a caregiver and also if you're going through grief. For me, it broke the routine of caregiving and now it breaks the routine of grieving. And for some reason, a change in your environment makes it easier to process those emotional aspects of caregiving and grief. There's nothing like a change of scenery. Lance and I spent so much time indoors staring at those same four walls. It was, I think, necessary for us to get out and get a change of scenery. It's not healthy to stay inside those four walls all the time. And since we were able to get out, I would take him to a local lake and wildlife refuge, which was just a few miles from our house. And we would watch the sunrise and the sunset. And I can't even tell you what a difference it made to be able to do that on a regular basis. And as the years went on and it was harder to get him out there, I really missed it. And I saw a difference in him not being able to leave the house anymore. And travel for me always encourages vulnerability and connection too, because you're meeting people. Well, if you're like me, I talk to everybody. I met so many people while I was in Ireland, and I just felt so much connection with them. Their culture of kindness made it easy for me to do that. Maybe that's why this was so healing for me because of the people there. We all know that saying, you never know what people are going through, so just be kind. And the Irish people, they live that. There were two people I met on this trip who I was able to start up conversations with. Jenna was there for one of the conversations. The other one was while I was waiting in the airport for her to arrive. But the first one was someone who had lost her dad just a couple of months earlier. And then when Jenna and I were on the train on our way back to Dublin, we met a gentleman who had lost his wife 3 years ago. There's just something about grief. It's universal. It's like when I was a caregiver. When I talked to another caregiver, there were so many things that I didn't need to say because a caregiver just knew what I meant. And it's the same thing with grief. And I found that with these two people while I was in Ireland. Like I said, it was beautiful. So I was pretty open with some people while I was on this trip, but I would like to stress that you should always trust your instincts because it isn't always safe to be vulnerable and to share personal things like that. But in these two instances specifically, it felt like it was the right thing to do. And I'm so glad I did because I feel like all of us healed through that a little bit, not just me. I do want to acknowledge Jenna's role in this journey through grief. She joined me in Ireland, having some idea that this was going to be an emotional trip for me. And I'm not going to speak for Jenna. She can speak for herself. But I will say that what I know about grief and sitting with someone in their grief, it is hard. It doesn't matter if you have been through it or not. Sitting with someone else in their grief is so challenging. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to do the wrong thing, but you want it to be better. And I still find it very, very difficult, even after everything that I've been through after losing Lance. I find it difficult to know what to say or do when someone is grieving. So kudos to Jenna for walking through that 8 days in Ireland with me, because I know that that couldn't have been easy. She handled my silences and my grief with grace and just allowed me to process everything that I needed to without any pressure. Her presence there allowed me to heal in ways that I know I wouldn't have been able to had I been there alone. The patience that she showed reflects the support that caregivers and those who are grieving often need, but don't always receive. When I got home, I felt so much lighter and I felt less tied to my old caregiving life. And that actually prompted me to make some changes in what I'm doing with this podcast. I'm going to be focusing more on other caregiver stories for a couple of reasons. One, I don't feel like I need to keep talking about my story. But more importantly, talking about my story has helped me heal so much. And I want to offer that to other caregivers. Also, after coming home from Ireland, I feel less compelled to dwell on the past and more ready than ever to embrace my new life. This trip marked a turning point for me. I felt the shift while I was there. I feel like I'm stepping into a new identity, just shedding a lot of that old stuff that's been weighing me down, that's been holding me back. But with this new identity comes a whole new set of challenges. So I'm sure that I will talk about that at some point. I would like to encourage caregivers and those who are dealing with grief to find those ways to let go of the heaviness that might be holding you back. It could be through travel, it could be through physically getting rid of things that just carry that heaviness, like those shoes did for me. Could also be through sharing your stories, because I don't know about you, but for so many years, I felt like my story didn't matter. But all of our stories matter. Your story matters. This trip impacted me in ways that I hadn't expected. It was a gift from Lance that helped me heal, and it inspired a new direction for my podcast. One thing I learned through this is that travel, kindness, and vulnerability can transform grief into growth. I would love for you to join the conversation. Please share your comments on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, send me a text message. I would love to hear from you. I do want to give a big shout out to Jenna for all that she has done to help me heal through this podcast, through this trip to Ireland, and by being an amazing friend, an amazing human being in general. Thank you, Jenna. And before I go, I would like to dedicate this episode to the memory of my sweet superhero, Lance. I wouldn't be who I am without the life that I lived with you. And I love you and I miss you, but I'm doing well. And I know that you would be so happy for me. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Please tune in next time for more caregiver stories.